Chapter 1. Deceitful Savior. A thick layer of near-toxic smog hung low over the city, a noxious blanket obscuring the tops of the few remaining intact structures. As Senator Bennett took his place at the podium, he squinted through the caustic haze at the crowd before him, their faces a mix of hope and desperation in this polluted urban wasteland. The air was heavy with the tang of industrial chemicals and the ever-present threat of airborne pathogens, forcing many in the audience to breathe through filtration masks of varying quality, another visible sign of the deep-seated inequality that permeated society. Senator Kai Bennett stood at the podium, the harsh lights of the campaign rally shining down on his face. He squinted against the brightness, his eyes scanning the sea of tired faces before him. The crowd stretched as far as he could see, a sign of how desperate the nation had become. Bennett's fingers tightened slightly on the edges of the podium, the only outward sign of the tension building inside him. He'd practiced this speech 100 times, but the weight of the moment felt like a physical force pressing down on him. This was it, the turning point. Everything depended on the next few minutes. As he prepared to speak, Bennett couldn't help but notice the stark divisions within the crowd. The front rows were filled with those wearing the latest AR glasses and smartwear, their clothes pristine and their skin unblemished by the harsh environment. Behind them, separated by a nearly invisible force field, stood the masses, their clothes patched and worn, their faces marked by the telltale signs of prolonged exposure to the toxic air. "My fellow Americans," he began, his voice strong and clear, easily carrying over the expectant hush of the crowd. "For too long we've lived under the boot of corporate greed and government oppression. They tell us this is progress, but look around. Our cities are drowning, our air is poison, and our children are starving. This isn't progress. This is giving up." As he spoke, holoscreens flickered to life around the square, projecting his image across the city. Bennett's face, earnest and determined, loomed large over the gathered masses. In the shadows, corporate drones hovered, their cameras fixed on the gathering crowd, silent watchers of the very system Bennett was speaking out against. Autonomous police robots patrolled the edges of the crowd, their metallic bodies gleaming in the harsh light. Some people eyed them nervously, while others seemed to take comfort in their presence. It was a stark reminder of how much the world had changed. "But we are not beaten," Bennett continued, his voice rising with passion. "We are not broken. We are Americans. And it's time we remembered what that means." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a current of energy that Bennett could feel in his bones. He pressed on, painting a picture of a future where people mattered more than profit margins, where the government served its citizens instead of its shareholders. It was a beautiful lie, and the crowd ate it up eagerly. As Bennett spoke, he couldn't help but marvel at the scene before him. The Washington Monument, once a proud symbol of American ideals, now stood as a grim reminder of what they'd lost. Its white stone was stained with years of grime, the obelisk jutting into a sky always gray with smog. To its left, the Lincoln Memorial sat partially underwater in the swollen Potomac, rising sea levels having long since overwhelmed the city's flood barriers. "Look at what they've done to our home," Bennett said, gesturing to the decaying cityscape around them. "The corporations promised us prosperity, but all they've given us is ruin. They promised us freedom, but they've enslaved us with debt and despair." The crowd's energy was almost tangible now, a living thing that seemed to pulse with each word Bennett spoke. He could see it in their eyes, the hunger, the desperation, the faintest glimmer of hope. It was intoxicating. "But today we say no more," Bennett declared, his voice thunderous. "Today we stand together and declare that we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we declare our independence from corporate rule." The crowd erupted, a deafening roar that shook the very ground. "Bennett! Bennett! Bennett!" The chant began, swelling until it drowned out the constant hum of the city's machinery. As the rally reached its peak, Bennett allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Phase 1 was complete. The seeds of revolution had been planted. Now it was time to nurture them, to shape them to his will. Later, as the last supporters trickled away, Bennett stood alone on the stage. The square was eerily quiet now. The only sound the soft whir of cleaning robots as they swept up the trash left behind by the crowd. He closed his eyes, savoring the moment of solitude. "Impressive performance, eh?" Voice said from the shadows, startling Bennett out of his thoughts. He turned to see a figure emerge, their face hidden by a high collar and dark glasses. "The board is pleased." Bennett's public mask slipped for a moment, revealing a cold, calculating gaze. "Tell them phase 1 is complete," he said, his voice low and controlled. "We move to the next stage tomorrow." The figure nodded and melted back into the darkness, leaving Bennett alone once more. He turned to face the empty square, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The game was just beginning, and he held all the cards. As Bennett left the stage, a lone drone captured his final moments in the spotlight. Its camera zoomed in, revealing a small, barely noticeable device nestled behind Bennett's ear. The feed cut out abruptly, leaving only static in its wake. The next morning, Bennett woke early, his mind already racing with the day's agenda. He padded silently through his penthouse apartment, the soft glow of dawn barely penetrating the heavily tinted windows. As he prepared his morning coffee, a news holo flickered to life on the kitchen counter. Senator Kai Bennett's passionate speech yesterday has sparked a firestorm of debate. The anchor's voice filled the room. Supporters call him a champion of the people, while critics accuse him of dangerous populism. Our panel of experts weighs in. Bennett tuned out the chatter, his attention focused on the scrolling ticker at the bottom of the screen. Corporate stock prices were down across the board, a direct result of his rally. He allowed himself a small smile. Everything was going according to plan. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. "Incoming call from Operative Sigma," his AI assistant announced. "Accept," Bennett said, his demeanor shifting instantly from relaxed to alert. A holographic figure materialized in the center of the kitchen, a woman with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. "Good morning, Senator," she said, her tone clipped and professional. "I trust you've seen the numbers." Bennett nodded. "The market's reacting exactly as we predicted." "How are our friends in the corporate sector taking it?" "They're nervous," Operative Sigma replied. "Several CEOs have reached out looking for reassurances. They want to know if you can be controlled." Bennett's laugh was cold and humorless. "Let them sweat," he said. "The more they panic, the easier they'll be to manipulate when the time comes." Sigma's expression remained blank, but Bennett could sense her unease. "Sir, if I may, are you sure this is wise? The corporations still hold a lot of power. If they were to unite against us—" "They won't," Bennett cut her off, his voice hard. "They're too greedy, too short-sighted. By the time they realize what's happening, it'll be too late." Sigma nodded, clearly not entirely convinced, but unwilling to push the issue further. "What's our next move?" Bennett's eyes gleamed with anticipation. "We push harder. I want rallies in every major city by the end of the week, and leak some of the documents we got from Ameri-Corp. Nothing too damaging yet, just enough to keep the public angry and the corporations off balance." "Understood," Sigma said. "And what about the AI situation?" "Our sources say the Kenyan research team is making big progress." Bennett's expression darkened. "Keep a close eye on that. If they get too close to a breakthrough, we may need to take decisive action." Sigma nodded, her hologram flickering slightly. "Is there anything else, sir?" "Yes," Bennett said, his tone suddenly thoughtful. "What's the status of Project Lazarus?" Sigma's eyebrows rose slightly, the only sign of her surprise. "It's moving forward, sir. But the ethical issues—" "I don't care about ethics," Bennett snapped. "I care about results." Make it happen, whatever it takes." "Yes, sir," Sigma replied, her hologram fading away. Alone once more, Bennett turned to stare out the window at the sprawling cityscape below. The masses down there thought they knew him, thought they understood what he was after. They had no idea of the true scope of his ambitions. "Soon," he murmured to himself, his reflection in the glass overlaying the city like a ghost. "Soon, everything will change." As the day wore on, Bennett moved through a whirlwind of meetings, interviews, and strategy sessions. To the outside world, he was the picture of a dedicated public servant, tirelessly working for the good of the people. But behind closed doors, a different story unfolded. In a secure underground facility deep beneath the city, Bennett stood before a group of shadowy figures, their faces hidden by holographic masks. These were the true power brokers, the puppet masters who had been pulling the strings of governments and corporations for decades. "Gentlemen," Bennett addressed them, his voice echoing in the large room. "Our plan is moving forward exactly as we planned. The masses are angry, the corporations are scared, and the government is paralyzed. The stage is set for our final act." One of the figures leaned forward, their mask flickering slightly. "And what about the resistance? There are whispers of a growing underground movement." Bennett's smile was cold and predatory. "Let them whisper," he said. "In fact, encourage it. The more they think they're making a difference, the less likely they are to notice what's really happening until it's too late." As the meeting ended, Bennett felt a surge of excitement. Everything he had worked for, everything he had sacrificed, was finally within reach. The world was about to change, and he would be the one to bring in a new era. Little did he know, far away in a lab in Nairobi, a young scientist named Amino Okafor was on the verge of a discovery that would shake the very foundations of Bennett's carefully laid plans. The future hung in the balance, and the game was far from over. As Bennett left the underground facility, he couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between the pristine, climate-controlled environment he was leaving and the harsh reality of the world above. The air outside was thick with smog, forcing him to activate the personal air purifier built into his suit. Around him, people hurried by, their faces covered with masks of varying quality, another visible sign of the deep-seated inequality that permeated society. He made his way to his next appointment, a private meeting with the CEO of Neuralink, one of the largest tech conglomerates in the world. As he walked, he passed by a group of protesters, their signs decrying the latest round of genetic discrimination laws. Bennett barely spared them a glance, but he made a mental note to have his team look into ways to exploit this growing unrest. The Neuralink building loomed ahead, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that seemed to pierce the very sky. As Bennett approached, he noticed a commotion at the entrance. A group of people were being turned away by security, their outdated neural implants marking them as unworthy of entry. Bennett watched with detached interest as one man pleaded with the guards, claiming he had a job interview. The guards remained unmoved, their augmented eyes glowing faintly as they scanned the man's implant and found it lacking. Bennett breezed past the scene, his top-of-the-line implant granting him immediate access. As he rode the elevator to the top floor, he reflected on how easy it was to control people when you could literally program their thoughts. The Neuralink CEO was waiting for him, a nervous smile plastered on his face. "Senator Bennett," the CEO greeted him, extending a hand. "It's an honor to have you here." Bennett shook the man's hand, noting the slight tremor in his grip. "The honor is mine, Mr. Zhao. Neuralink has been at the forefront of neural interface technology for years. I'm excited to see what you have in store for the future." Zhao nodded eagerly, leading Bennett to a sleek conference room. "We've made some incredible breakthroughs recently. I think you'll be very interested in our latest project." As Zhao launched into a presentation, Bennett's mind wandered. He thought about the protesters outside, about the man denied entry to the building. These were the people he claimed to champion in his speeches, the downtrodden masses yearning for a better life. But in reality, They were just pawns in a much larger game. And with this new implant, we'll be able to not only read but also influence neural patterns on a massive scale, Zhao was saying, his eyes shining with excitement. Imagine being able to shape public opinion with just a thought. Bennett leaned forward, suddenly very interested. Tell me more, he said, a predatory gleam in his eye. As Zhao delved into the technical details, Bennett's mind raced with possibilities. This technology could be the key to cementing his power, to ensuring that the masses not only accepted, but embraced the new world order he was creating. The meeting stretched on for hours, with Bennett probing every aspect of the new technology. By the time he left, night had fallen over the city. As he stepped out of the Neuralink building, he paused for a moment, taking in the scene before him. The city stretched out in every direction, a maze of towering skyscrapers and crumbling tenements. Holographic advertisements flickered in the air, their gaudy colors a stark contrast to the grime-covered buildings. In the distance, he could see the glow of the massive environmental domes that housed the ultra-wealthy, protected from the harsh realities of the outside world. Bennett smiled to himself. Soon, very soon, all of this would be his to control. The corporations, the government, even the thoughts of the people themselves, all would bend to his will. As he made his way back to his penthouse, Bennett's mind was already racing with plans. The Neuralink technology would need to be acquired, of course. And then there was the matter of the Kenyan AI research team. They would need to be dealt with, one way or another. He arrived home to find a message waiting for him from Operative Sigma. Urgent news regarding Project Lazarus. The message read, "Please contact immediately." Bennett's pulse quickened. Project Lazarus was the linchpin of his entire plan. If something had gone wrong, he quickly established a secure connection with Sigma. Her hologram appeared before him, her expression unreadable. "Report," Bennett demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. "Sir, we've had a breakthrough with Project Lazarus," Sigma said, her voice carefully neutral. "The test subjects are showing unprecedented levels of neural plasticity. We believe we can begin the next phase ahead of schedule." Bennett felt a surge of triumph. "Excellent," he said, a rare genuine smile crossing his face. "Begin preparations immediately. I want to see the results for myself." As he ended the call, Bennett felt a sense of inevitability wash over him. Everything was falling into place. The world was changing, and he would be the architect of that change. Little did he know that across the city, in a rundown apartment complex, a group of resistance fighters were gathering. Led by a former Neuralink engineer named Maya-chan, they were planning their own revolution. And they had just received some very interesting information about Senator Kai Bennett and his true intentions. The game was far from over, and the pieces were just beginning to move on the board. As dawn broke over the city, Bennett found himself unable to sleep. The events of the previous day swirled in his mind, a complex web of plans and possibilities. He stood at the window of his penthouse, watching as the city slowly came to life below him. The streets were already filling with people, each going about their daily routines. From his vantage point, Bennett could see the clear divisions in society. The well-dressed executives hurrying to their high-rise offices, the service workers in their drab uniforms shuffling to their menial jobs, and the outcasts, those deemed unfit for employment due to outdated implants or genetic markers, huddled in the shadows of the gleaming buildings. Bennett's comm unit chimed, interrupting his musings. It was Operative Sigma again. "Sir," she said, her voice tense, "we've detected some unusual activity in the lower levels. It seems there may have been a security breach." Bennett's eyes narrowed. "Explain," he demanded. "Someone accessed classified files related to Project Lazarus," Sigma replied. "We're still tracing the source, but initial indications suggest it may have been an inside job." Bennett felt a cold fury building inside him. If word of Project Lazarus got out, everything he had worked for could be jeopardized. "Find the leak," he growled. And when you do, bring them to me.